There is a morning, there is a process you need to go through in order to just process the information, just to move on beyond that and move to stages of recovering. I think you can say that this again is a period of grief that we are going through, and there are stages of grief that we need to go until we finally get through the acceptance and are able to move on as a community, as a state.
Yeah. Do you feel, though, that, and I don't know what the answer is, but you go back to a legislative frame of mind and say, is there something you can do to try and stop these things from happening?
We would love to stop these things from happening, but the
Right.
question becomes, how do you do this
Yeah.
when these are random acts of violence, probably from people who are unstable? I don't know that stable people will necessarily get a gun and start shooting other people on the street.
Mm-hmm.
It seems I just can't fathom that. It is just so weird to, and if you say, is there something that triggered this? We
Yeah.
don't know that as
Right.
of yet.
Still haven't been able to figure that out.
We are still trying to figure out, and how are you going to stop random acts? I think that we need to go through that process of grieving, and if there is a way to stop this, then yes, we ought to be looking at it. But when these are just random acts, it's real hard to say that we're going to be stopping
Yeah.
anybody. It would be a significant restriction on everyone's freedom to say we're going to regulate society so severely that you can't do anything different than anybody else, that you can't be random in society.
Senator Mike Nofs is joining us in the studio now. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you?
Very good. Thank you. Thanks for being with us today.
You're welcome.
We've been talking about the events of Saturday night in Kalamazoo County, and certainly we felt the ripple effects of that here. What are your thoughts on this situation?
Yeah, it's been in law enforcement for 30 years. It's one of the worst calls you can get.
Yeah.
It is horrible when someone's out there terrorizing your community and doing it at random. Makes no rhyme nor reason. It doesn't give you anywhere to start to look for the individual. What really helped and what was amazing through this tragic event was the efforts of law enforcement over there in Kalamazoo. Having 3 different scenes within a couple of hours of each other. And they worked really well together. It's called the Unified Command Structure that they implemented. And the Sheriff's Department took the first scene. The Department of Public Safety of Kalamazoo did a good job and took the second scene. Then the Michigan State Police took the Cracker Barrel scene out on Texas Township out by I-94. So, and then got the information. The other really, really helpful thing to help law enforcement, I think, and bring this to a closure a little quicker than normal was social media and the information, and also the regular media. Channel 3 did a great job, as well as other outlets over there in continually broadcasting the information, keeping us all aware in the community what was going on, and trying to let us know how we could stay safe. And law enforcement and sharing the information so quickly, and ended up capturing the individual down in a parking lot downtown Kalamazoo. Who knows whether or not to strike again or not? We'll never know unless he talks. But that was one of the scariest calls you can ever get as law enforcement individual, and trying to keep your community safe. And so I'd like to commend and give kudos to all those agencies. It is really, really tragic when you're going out at night and just having fun in a ritual. I think it was a yearly ritual for the people from Battle Creek. And you're sitting in your car getting ready to go, and all of a sudden someone walks up and just takes your life.
I asked this question of Dr. Bizon and Representative Maturin earlier in the week. As a lawmaker, do you have a reaction maybe that you've got to go try and figure out a way to fix this?
I think obviously there'll be after-action reports, and then people will sit down and look at a lot of that criteria and see if there's anything we could do or anything that is needed in the way of legislation and or policy. But in this one here, with what I know right now and what we've heard, you cannot stop someone that has in their mind they're going to harm someone, and unfortunately, you don't know that beforehand. At least we didn't think we knew it, and as far as the information we have now, we still don't know that. You talk to his neighbors. His neighbors said he was just a normal individual, hardworking, 2 kids, no fights or calls for disturbance, and no arrest on the individual. And so there are no indicators there to show that there was a problem. So I don't know how you would do something to prevent that.
It's been a situation in which we've certainly seen this story in other places. We also have had another shooting in another state, and we haven't even paid respects to those whom we've lost from Saturday's events. Is this an American problem? Is this a problem that somehow we can tackle as lawmakers?
Yeah.
I think that when you talk about violence, we have a significant problem with violence, especially in our cities. You know, you take a look at a place like Chicago, where on a weekend you may have 5, 7, 12 killings.
Right.
A lot of it may be gang related. A lot of this may be black on black violence. And when you say lives matter, lives do matter, and we need to come up with better solutions other than, well, this is just American culture.
Mm-hmm. We've also certainly heard about trying to come up with some common sense solutions. This is a difficult subject to discuss without it getting political, but there have been some lawmakers on, I suppose, both sides of the aisle who've said we have to talk about this somehow and figure out how we control this situation.
Again, it's just hard to try to control something of an unknown that you have no clue that somebody's going to snap or do something like that. You know, obviously it'd be nice to be able to read people's minds, but we can't do that.
Yeah.
And who knows when an individual just is going to check out and do something crazy. So all I can say is, make sure you're aware of your surroundings, what's going on. I think in law enforcement, I always tell people that if it feels like it's a little bit dangerous, it must be. Take those precautions. If you're starting to feel inside yourself this just doesn't feel right, go inside where there are other people and try to take a little bit of cover if something just doesn't look right, whether you're walking down the street or in the parking lot or whatever. I mean, it's like the lady in the first incident. She just felt like the guy was weird.
Something was wrong. Yeah.
Something was wrong, and so she hollered real quick to tell her kids to get back in the house. He started shooting, and she put herself and took a couple more bullets up Piers, save her kids. Good things her kids listened and got back inside.
Mm-hmm.
And then he basically took off. So, when you start to feel that way, she did the exact right thing and tried to get her kids into safety first and then worry about herself. So she's really to be commended.
We're talking today with State Senator Mike Nofs and Representative Dr. John Bizon. Back shortly, and we'll check the forecast as well on WBCK. Right now, State Senator Mike Nofs and Representative Dr. John Bizon are in the studio with us today. We've been talking about a number of current events. I suppose another one on the radar still is the Flint water situation. And Dr. Bizon, you and I have talked about this regularly, but Senator Nofs, you and I have not. Right. So let's hear your impressions of this situation now.
Well, I think obviously there were problems or things at the local level didn't occur right, and things at the state level that we didn't do right, and things at the federal level that we didn't do right, and basically we did not do a very good job of doing our jobs in protecting the people. In the Constitution, the Michigan Constitution, it talks about one of the things and primary things that we as legislators are supposed to do is keep the public health and safety of the citizenry of Michigan. Obviously, we failed at that, and so I think there are a lot of missteps. I think we're trying to find out exactly what happened, the occurrence, and look at what should be done and shouldn't be done. We were told originally, obviously, that I think it started back in 2006 when they designated the Flint River as an alternative to the Detroit water system they currently were on at that time, and as a backup, as most cities do, in case something happens to that resource. And then the Flint City Council, I think, voted 7-1 in 2013 to go ahead and disconnect from the Detroit water, break the contract they had with them. That was because they were, what I understand, was they were using 20% of the water but getting 30% of the bill for that system.
Uh-huh.
So they thought that was unfair and tried to work with them and couldn't work with them. At the same time, they entered a contract to build a new water line out of Port Huron to come over and provide them water to the Flint water system, which is called the KWA line, and that currently will be done by 2017.
But not today.
But not today. And so what happened was, and typically happens is any water source, in the United States, anywhere in any city, generally there are a lot of lead pipes out there that the water travels through, and what they use is a phosphorus, I think it is, that they put and add to the water, and it seals in. If there is lead pipes along the way, it seals those lead pipes in, and so the corrosive matter of the water doesn't interact with those pipes and create the lead poisoning. Detroit does that regularly, and that was supposed to be done when they decided to switch to the Flint water system.
Mm-hmm.
The water was a little bit different, as most bodies of water that you use are a little different, but it was safe, but you had to put these corrosive measures in there to keep that going, and that didn't happen. And in the end, I believe it was the EPA and the DEQ failed to do that, and no one caught it, that they weren't doing it, even though they were being asked and made sure, and they were saying they were taking the anti-corrosive measures. And so on up the power change, and I'm not making excuses, but the governor and others thought, getting reports that was being done, and the EPA was confirming what the DEQ was telling it, which was the water's safe.
This question is for both of you. Today's story is as the snowball effect continues in an attempt to try and figure out how involved the Snyder administration is in this problem, that some of the emails have indicated now that have been recently released that the word reached the governor's inner circle that there were problems and you should go back to the Detroit water system ASAP.
Yep.
Is there discussion in circles in Lansing and the House and the Senate that we really need to dig into that further, or is that academic at this point? We have this problem; it's got to be solved.
Well, we got to solve the problem. We can do two things at once. We're trying to solve the problem, doing everything we can to take care of the issue at hand, making sure that people aren't drinking this contaminated water, this poison water, any longer. Making sure that we're doing whatever we can, that we've hooked back up to the Flint water or the Detroit water system. Takes a while to flush that system through and get those sealants back in there to seal those lead pipes up again. But the water's a lot better. I don't think it's perfect yet, and so they haven't told everybody to start drinking yet. It is kind of nice that this administration has compared, and I guess I am comparing it to other administrations, but at least they opened up and released 10,000 emails. They're not trying to hide anything. I think that is great so that we all can learn from what did happen, what transpired, and look at what we do and put in place to make sure that doesn't happen again. Flint's not the only city that has lead pipes. There are a lot of places, a lot of cities who put these systems in 50, 60, 80 years ago, 100 years ago, and they have that. So it was just a bunch of mistakes that were made and didn't get caught. And I think what the governor said was no one used any common sense. When you start getting these reports and you had outside contractors coming in and telling them the water was okay, and you had the EPA coming in, all the protocols were followed. Obviously, they didn't work.
Over on the House side, if I may say,
that
I think there is interest. I think your question was, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to make sure that this doesn't happen again? And I have to say that I had the opportunity to go down to Flint to speak with the medical community there, and so get some idea of the frustration that is evident on the ground within the city of Flint. And I think that in the House there is an appetite for a bipartisan, bicameral investigation as to exactly what happened. But before we undertake that, I think that we are waiting to see what the existing investigations show us before we say, yes, we're going to do this one more time. So I have every anticipation that we're going to be continuing with hearings, although I believe we're going to be waiting to get more information before we jump in ourselves.
Well, and Representative Matern was here earlier in the week and said something similar, that we have to see how all these details sort out. But generally speaking, as he saw it right now, he didn't think that the state should pay for a wholesale infrastructure replacement in Flint. Do you see it that way too?
Well, I think that we have, as Mike was pointing out, we have a problem with lead throughout this entire state. That if you take a look at actual blood levels of lead in children, you're going to find that there are many communities with higher blood levels than we have in Flint. That's not to say that the elevated levels that we've had in Flint are not a problem because they are a problem. When you turn on the tap, you expect water that you can cook with. You expect water
Sure.
that you can drink.
That's not
And
going to make you sick.
and that's exactly correct. We anticipate we have certain standards in civilized society, and among that is good water to drink. But by the same token, the major problem with lead in this state comes from the paint and the walls, and we already have an abatement program for lead that's run through HHS, that's run through Health and Human Services, that we are putting in millions of dollars every year trying to get rid of paint out of the walls and out of the other areas. Um, right now we're doing 5,000 tests a week, I am told,
Hmm.
in Flint, looking for where are there still pockets, because we've been adding those triphosphates to the water, trying to reestablish that coating for
Right.
a number of months now. And one of the experts is the professor from Virginia Tech,
Yeah.
Mark Edwards, I want to say.
Mm-hmm.
And his initial statements would lead you to believe that once you start adding the triphosphates back into the water within 6 weeks, that biofilm, that living film that coats the pipes, ought to be returning and ought to abate much of the problem. Um, and there is also evidence out of Washington, D.C., where they did that. They had a problem with lead in the water. They started replacing the pipes and found that they had even higher levels of lead because they were destroying that biofilm. That
Mm-hmm.
the process of destroying the pipes made the issue worse. And so we have to be careful that we don't do that as well. So this is going to be a process that we need to plan for.
Got about a minute left here. What do you
Yeah.
think, Mike? Should
I
the
think-
state pay for that
I
replacement?
think the state should go in there and test all of them, and any that can't be remediated through a normal means need to be replaced and should be replaced, especially in our schools. Make sure every water fountain there is tested to make sure our kids are safe there when they return to school. Not just the homes. I think it's anywhere and everywhere, restaurants, etc. They should do that all in the city of Flint, and we should pay for that testing. And those remediation plans that the doctor was just talking about, if they don't make the water safe again, then we should dig up and replace those pipes.
All right, that's where we'll leave it. Senator Mike Nofs, Representative Dr. John Bizon, thanks to both of you today.
Thank you, Richard.
Appreciate the time.